mi gente, bienvenidos a mi canal. Hoy vamos a hablar sobre la época dorada del cine mexicano que ocurrió entre los años 30 y los años 50 y transformó totalmente la industria del cine tanto en México como en otros lados de América Latina y en Estados Unidos. Vamos a platicar un poco sobre los actores, los personajes y las películas que se pueden encontrar en esta época y cómo las pueden aprovechar para mejorar su español. Vámonos. So, the golden age of Mexican cinema refers to films that came out in between the 30s and the 50s that revolutionized the film industry in Mexico and in many parts of Latin America. We're dealing with the post-revolution time and the films that came out. Being post-revolution, there was a huge idea of forming a new cultural identity, which film was a huge tool for making this happen. It was a way for Mexico to tell its own stories and present its own culture to the outside world, while at the same time forging that new national identity for a post-revolution world. So in the 30s, sound films became the norm, and Mexico was quick to adopt this trend. And by the mid-30s, a booming film industry had been formed with the help of the government. The Mexican Institute of Cinematography was founded in 1942, and Mexico, the government, began promoting films as part of its national identity and national culture. At this time, Mexican filmmakers like Emilio Fernández and Fernando de Fuentes helped establish a unique cinematic style that combined Mexican folk culture with elements of Hollywood, which resonated deeply with the audiences. So, why did Mexican film become so popular both nationally in Mexico as well as internationally? Well, first, they revolved around central themes for all people like love, betrayal, family, identity. Things that everyone can relate to no matter where they're from. But at the same time, they managed to keep it deeply rooted in Mexico and Mexican culture, from the landscapes and traditions to the music and folklore. And this created a sense of pride in being Mexican, who saw their lives reflected on the big screen. Another reason for its popularity was its emotional depth. It focused on things like class struggle, gender inequality, gender roles, poverty, and the impact of the revolution. Also, Mexican cinema was incredibly affordable. The films were easily accessible to the public. Many people could go and watch these films, and it didn't break the bank. Right? And with the rise of films across the nation, Cinépolis and Cinemex became major players and became essential parts of Mexican culture. In fact, some of the most iconic films of the age were made on incredibly small budgets. So now let's talk about some of the themes you would see in these films, one of which was the struggle of the classes, and specifically of the poor. For example, the film starring Pedro Infante portrayed the daily lives of working class Mexicans, showing their hardships, the dreams, and their strong will to overcome their current situation. These stories especially resonated with the audience as they saw themselves up on the big screen, saw their struggles in their daily life, and were really able to connect with these films. Another important theme was romance. Think tragic romance, passionate, and sometimes a little over the top. Films like María, where the main character's love story is set against the backgrounds of indigenous traditions and social prejudice. Romance in these films wasn't just about love, it was about sacrifice, social class, and unrequited desires. Additionally, Mexican melodramas were incredibly popular at this time. These films would tug at the heartstrings, filled with dramatic twists, moral dilemmas, and intense emotional scenes. It was all about exaggeration and making the audience feel every single moment. Of course, none of this would have been possible without the legendary actors that worked in the films during this time, including Pedro Infante, who was a heartthrob of Mexican cine, who was a heartthrob and became the face of Mexican cinema at this time. He often depicted the working class hero in starring films such as Nosotros los Pobres and Los Tres Garcia. His charm and charisma made him a cultural icon. We also have María Félix, known as La Doña, who was also one of the famous actresses of the time. She embodied strength, beauty, and independence in films like Doña Bárbara, where she played a powerful and mysterious woman who wasn't afraid to take charge. We also have Jorge Negrete, who was not only an actor but also a singer. His performance in ranchera films like Viva Mexico made him a beloved character in the cinema industry. And then we have Dolores del Rio, who's one of the first Mexican actresses to make it big in Hollywood, who later returned to Mexico and became a key figure in some important films like María Candelaria. These actors ended up becoming household names and are known around Mexico today as being great actors. Now let's get to the fun part, how we can use these films in order to study Spanish. So the one thing I really enjoyed, I took film classes in college, and these were great classes because these actors oftentimes speak very, very clearly. They're very eloquent, they're well spoken. You get slang words, but you get the expressions without necessarily the heavy accent that you might find walking around, for example, Mexico City or Guadalajara, right? Which this in turn makes it a perfect tool for language learners. Right? So one major benefit of these films is the slow, clear speech. The actors at this time often use good pronunciation, good enunciation, and good intonation in order to be understood by the most people possible. And whether you're watching the film with subtitles or not, you can quickly pick up on the natural rhythm of their speech and adapt your ear to it so that you start to understand more and more. Second, the vocabulary in these films is usually perfect for intermediate learners. Right? You encounter tons of everyday colloquial expressions, formal phrases, and regional slang that you can use to boost your vocab. For instance, in Nosotros los Pobres, you're going to hear a lot of working class slang. This is all, in quotation marks because some of the words have fallen out of favor. There's other words that have come up, right? But you'll get a lot of expressions that are still used all the time in Mexico. And then we have movies like Doña Barbara, where the language is going to be a little bit more formal and refined. Lastly, the ability to do accent practice and shadowing is going to be great with these films because they speak really well. Mexican Spanish tends to be a lot slower than some of the other places. It's a little bit more melodic and easier to understand, and in turn, easier for you to copy and practice your accent. But if you're not interested in picking up the Mexican accent, you can do this same thing with films from all over Latin America, whether you're interested in Spain, Argentina, Colombia, right? You can find movies and film that are in the accent of the language that you are learning. And while watching these films, you can practice the idea of shadowing, which is where I read along with the subtitles and say out loud what they're saying so that I can practice my accent, practice copying how they're saying things, and get better enunciation and pronunciation. So Mexican Golden Age cinema is more than just a historical period. It's a treasure trove of cultural insights, fantastic stories, and is an amazing way to improve your Spanish. So whether you're a language learner or just a fan of cinema, I highly suggest you dive into these films. You're going to leave with knowledge not just of the language, but also history, background, and cultural items that are present and are still talked about and understood today in Mexico. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys are interested in improving your Spanish and you want my verb tense cheat sheet, use the link below in the comments or in the description to sign up to get that, as well as 6 days of emails to improve your Spanish and get you on the path to fluency. And if you're interested in learning more about classes, be sure to send me a message via WhatsApp. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.